Tom Cruise ends up somewhere with loads of sand and digs up a mummy. They bring it back to the UK where he dies but then comes back and he isn't sure why. Something evil is afoot, and it's not just the advent of yet another fucking cinematic universe. So our heroes have to band together to stop an ancient evil by finding a secret artifact, and the biggest mystery of the whole movie is how 5 people were credited to write it. I've said it before and I'll say it again. A blockbuster movie only needs to do 5 things to succeed. It needs to have a good plot, good characters, it needs to be relatively well made, it shouldn't be offensive in any meaningless way, and if all of those things are correct, then it should inspire some sort of emotion in the audience. The Mummy, it's got a bit of a mixed record on this one. The plot is admirably goofy. It starts off with a flashback to medieval England, then cuts to modern day London, then cuts to like ancient Egypt, then cuts to modern day Iraq. It's kind of all over the place like that throughout. And for me, I like a plot to be kind of weird. I think that's often a fun way of having a blockbuster work, you know? So that's okay for me. I don't mind about that. Nothing in the plot is surprising or particularly interesting. It's all relatively obvious to any vaguely film literate viewer who's going to go see that. And I don't mean like someone who's seen loads of art films. I mean if you've seen the other Mummy films, if you've seen the Indiana Jones films, you'll have a pretty good sense straight away of where this is going. But you know, it's weird enough to hold interest. It deals relatively well with setting up some of the Dark Universe stuff that Universal wants to be a big thing. I think I'm going to give it a pass on the plot. I think the plot on its own is perfectly fine. This film is jam-packed full of characters and pretty much none of them are interesting in any way. Tom Cruise's character, whose name unfortunately has already kind of escaped me, is this kind of cookie-cutter generic American lead for an action-adventure film. He's a bad guy who's just trying to do the right thing, where that badness is never really identified and we don't really get any extended understanding of it. Sure, he's involved in a minor bit of antiquity theft, but in a world with Nathan Drake, Indiana Jones and Han Solo, fundamentally that isn't really enough to identify you just as being an anti-hero. Now that wouldn't be that much of a problem if it wasn't the fact that his whole character arc in the film is around a sort of redemption theme. It's kind of him working out what he should do right. Without the dark at the start, you don't really get the light at the end, so throughout we just get this sort of run-of-the-mill Tom Cruise action-adventure film performance. If you've seen Night and Day, if you've seen the later Mission Impossible films, so you've got an action-adventure film where your lead is pretty uncharismatic and kind of dull. You've got 2 other options to kind of spice it up and make it interesting for the audience. You've got your villain and you've got your love interest. Well, first of all, let's look at the love interest. Played by Annabelle Wallis, this character, Jenny something, is just stunningly bland. You know, if you're acting in an action-adventure film with a light tone and you can't get the comedy bits to land and you can't get the thrilling bits to land, then with all due respect, what are you doing in that film? The answer might be the kind of love between her and Tom Cruise, but I gotta be honest, it just doesn't exist on screen. Sofia Boutella as the mummy herself, I was kind of okay with her. I feel like the bits of the film that worked because of her. I don't think she gets much to do in the film. I'm overstating it. She murders a baby, you know, like she earns her villain credentials, but she doesn't actually do much in course of the plot itself. You know, the thing is with all film really, and especially with American blockbuster, characters are the engine that drives the film forward. Characters are the reasons why the plot works, why the tone works, why the directing has something to spark off. Every Steven Spielberg film, the casting is excellent. He really understands how to get actors to be in the right places, to give the right performances, to make the characters that drive the movie. This film fundamentally fails to understand that, it fundamentally fails to cast correctly, and as a result it just doesn't function as entertainment. Execution. A lot of the film revolves around Prodigium, which is this secret agency behind the scenes that manages supernatural stuff like monsters. You know, this is their new shared universe idea, looking at all their classic horror properties. They really do set up Prodigium well as a physical space. It's like this big research bunker underneath the Natural History Museum. That set is really cool and really well designed, and I kind of enjoyed some of the world building stuff that took place there. It's not reflective of the film as a whole, which often feels like a tour through stereotypical ideas about what different places are like. You know, this is what Iraq is like, although I've never been there. It was really weird for me living in London and watching the geography that they play out for that city. Like, it comes from a huge fundamental misunderstanding of like everything about how London works. I'm not really a pedant about that kind of stuff in movies, but here I think it really shows a complete lack of care and attention in the filmmakers, where they really don't mind how they portray a city where, you know, millions of people live, and where the film is very heavily promoted. It's just silly, and the whole film is indicative of that. The biggest issue with the movie comes comes from that lack of attention, which is that it doesn't have any sense of tone. It's super dark and really mystical and weird. And then all of the fight scenes are kind of slapsticky and they have kind of funny music in them. Then there are these really quite scary, visceral horror sequences as well, where the mummy is killing people. So you don't really know as an audience member what to make of the movie. It's not really clear what the filmmakers think the film is, let alone what they think you should think about it. That might explain why their casting is so off, because no one in the production process really had a handle on what the film was genuinely about or who it was for. The film isn't offensive to anyone in any way, except maybe Londoners. You might find it offensive, of course, just purely as an audience reaction, that we continue to give so much work to Tom Cruise, an actor who increasingly appears out of his depth and past his prime in the modern film world, and who's also a member of a cult that thinks that homosexuality is a disease and that the Holocaust is an invention of psychiatry. But, you know, hey, that's just on you, man. That's nothing to do with the film, and I'm just really talking about the art piece. Okay? With a plot that isn't terribly original, with actors who don't have the charisma or character writing to push the film past that, with a director and a creative team who don't seem to understand the tone of the film, it might not come as much as a surprise to you that I didn't particularly enjoy the movie and I didn't really get anything emotional out of it. So I'm going to give this film a 1 out of 5 on the blockbuster scale for having a plot that is occasionally somewhat weird enough to be interesting. Bring back Brendan Fraser, I say. If Corbyn can do it, so can he. Do let me know in the comments what you thought about my review. Did you enjoy The Mummy? Did you think that Sofia Boutella was a screen monster who was going to last over the centuries? If so, I can't believe anyone would ever say that. Please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what your opinion is. Have a nice day, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.